Hello, I'm Jack Fink, CBS 11 political reporter here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And welcome to those of you who are watching on our CBS DFW Facebook page and our website, cbsdfw.com. Today we are excited because 1 week out we are releasing the results of our brand new KTVT CBS 11 Dixie Strategies Texas poll. We're going to be taking your questions and comments on Facebook Live with the help of our great producer, Aparna Zalani. And joining us right now is the pollster for Dixie Strategies, Brian Graham. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tell us about the poll. How many people did we survey this time? And give us the mix-up between Republicans, Democrats, and independents.
Well, the poll was 980 likely voters, 383 self-identified Republicans, 304 Democrats, and 293 independent or no party affiliation voters.
And that's typically the mix that we find in Texas, is that
Correct.
right? With more people now identifying themselves as independents.
Correct. It is a rapidly growing demographic, people that identify as no party affiliation or independents, particularly among young people and Hispanics.
All right, well, let's go to our first set of numbers here. This is the Texas poll here. You can see behind us Donald Trump, for the first time, going over 50 points here in Texas.
Absolutely. Donald Trump has been in the high 40s to mid 40s throughout this election season in Texas. People have now decided, and it appears that Donald Trump has captured most of those undecided voters as we've gotten closer.
And if you look at how he's gone, really, from August, right after the conventions, and now here, he's gotten quite a bump since then. Hillary Clinton has gotten a bump, but less so. And the other candidates are really barely a mention here
Correct.
In Texas.
Yeah, well, people are really deciding between two people that they think can really be president. And a lot of people don't want to, as the saying goes, throw their vote away. So they aren't going to vote for someone who doesn't stand a chance of winning. People want to vote for someone who's winning. We saw that in the primaries. You had some great candidates running in the presidential primaries, especially on the Republican side. But if they were not polling well, they could never get the traction because no one wanted to get behind them and support them because they felt they were throwing their vote away.
And, you know, one of the interesting things is the poll, we started conducting this on Thursday the 27th through Saturday the 29th, the end of the day. Is that right?
Correct.
So the news broke on Friday about the FBI going back in and to take a look at the email situation with Hillary Clinton. What impact do you think that may have had? Because now, of course, and Craig, we have video of James Comey. He has certainly been at the whole center of this firestorm in the last several days. So what impact do you think this really had?
Well, I think most people had already made up their minds about the email situation regarding Hillary Clinton. However, being under investigation presently, without all the information out there, people don't know. Some people think the worst. Some people think it's nothing. But with independent voters, I think it's going to affect some of them. And remember, in this race, a lot of states are very, very close. So 1 or 2 percentage points can make an election in particular states, such as Florida or Pennsylvania or Ohio. Those are very close states, and an investigation could very well move the numbers there.
Well, I know right now the latest that we heard was that the Justice Department is making sure the FBI goes through these emails as quickly as possible, just to see. Certainly Hillary Clinton and the Democrats have called for that.
Correct, and the probe of the Clinton Foundation does not help as well. It's kind of a 1-2 punch for Hillary coming this late in the game. And really there's not much that she can do. People are already early voting, and it could have already affected and impacted some people's votes.
I want to remind everybody that we are taking your comments and questions. So, Aparna, do we have anybody commenting or any questions yet?
Yes, a lot of people.
Okay.
And Jean Sealer Bonifacio, I'm sorry, I'm messing up your name. In Texas, Texas is a red state. Is it really a surprise? That's what she's saying. And then there are quite a few people who are saying the same thing. You know, it's a Republican state? Is it a surprise?
Well, you know what's interesting? Thank you very much for the comments and questions, because you and I have talked about this really since August. You have always maintained that you thought Trump was going to get over 50% since the beginning. But don't forget, the last couple of polls, I think there were 4 recent polls just last week that showed Trump was leading by just 3 or 4 points. And even Real Clear Politics last week considered Texas a toss-up. Now, a lot of people criticized that, thought there was just no way because Texas is not a Democratic state yet. Every person I spoke to, every analyst I spoke to thought there's no way that's going to happen. So does Gene have a point where, hey, this is Texas?
Well, Texas is the largest electoral college state for Republicans. Republicans have to hold it if they hope to ever win the White House into the future. Demographics are changing in Texas. Texas is something that Republicans are going to have to watch and be cautious of. And by running these polls, we've seen the numbers in the state, and we've seen Hillary and Donald Trump and the race narrow at times, and now, of course, it's wider. It's very interesting to watch how this race has evolved and changed and moved forward. Did we think that Donald Trump was probably going to win this state all along? Yes, we did. But how much he wins the state is important because that is indicative of his campaign as a whole. If Donald Trump is having trouble, for instance, in Texas, then he's going to have trouble in a lot of other states if he can't do well in Texas.
Republican states.
Correct. Well,
states that he needs.
Or even blue states or purple states. I mean, if Donald Trump thinks that, you know, okay, if he's going to win purple states, but he can't even secure Texas, that would be a real problem for him. And it's a problem because in a presidential campaign, you have a finite amount of resources. And where do you have to spend those resources? If Hillary Clinton were able to keep it close in Texas and force Donald Trump to spend vital funds in the state of Texas to keep it, those are funds that are not being spent in Ohio or Florida or Pennsylvania, which are more purple states.
You know, it was very interesting because it was a couple of weeks ago where the Clinton campaign did spend some money. Now, it was only $100,000, which in Texas is nothing.
Correct.
Because this is a huge state with a lot of big media markets, Dallas-Fort Worth included, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, expensive. And, you know, maybe now wasn't such a good idea. Who knows? I mean, but she did spend money here. Craig, if we can go back to the first graphic that we had up, which is just the Texas poll here showing Donald Trump with 52%. What's interesting is these are really this is where John McCain was over then Senator Barack Obama back in 2008. He had an 11-point advantage, and Mitt Romney back in 2012 had a 16-point advantage over President Obama at that point. So this puts Trump back into that mix.
Correct. It puts him back to where he really should be. He's performing to the level where he should be. And, you know, we are seeing that in a lot of different states. You know, we actually ran a poll in Florida a few days ago, and it showed that Donald Trump was actually leading in the state of Florida. And, of course, that was preceded by a Bloomberg poll that showed him leading by 3 points. We showed him winning by 4 points. And then there was a New York Times poll that was at the same period, showed him winning by 4. So we've seen this trend around the country where momentum seems to be shifting towards Donald Trump at the moment.
And that is a good thing for our next graphic to be put up, because as in Florida, here in Texas, what appears to be driving Donald Trump's numbers, besides the undecided voters, are the independents. Take a look. Obviously, he's got most of the Republicans, and she has most of the Democrats. But when you look at the other, that is the independents. Talk to me a little bit about that and why that may be this time around.
Well, generally, when you're looking at a state that is more conservative, people who identify as independent or no party affiliation aren't necessarily completely independent. They have their leanings. And in a conservative state, they've already proven that they've voted more conservatively in the first place because the state is a conservative state.
Right.
So that he is winning independents is a good thing for him because, again, those voters are more likely to swing than Republicans or Democrats are. And he has shown that strength in other states as of right now. And it all has to do with momentum and peaking at the right time. There's also an excitement difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. If you look at a Donald Trump rally, Donald Trump will get 10, 20,000 people easy. Hillary Clinton struggles to get 2,000 at a rally. She can bring in Barack Obama and might be lucky if she gets 10,000 maybe. So there is an excitement gap there, and you can just see it in the crowds. It's obvious, and you've seen it this whole election cycle.
Well, we've covered it, right, and certainly we've been to the Trump rallies here in Dallas and Fort Worth and down in Austin. He has thousands of people, as you said, but my question is, that really didn't help him, at least in the polls up until now. I mean, Hillary Clinton, up until last week, everybody was saying this election is done. So did that enthusiasm gap really help him, or are Hillary Clinton's voters more the silent majority?
Well, they very well could be, but here's where it becomes important. Turnout. Who is more likely to turn out to vote? Excited people are more likely to turn out to vote than people who are not excited about their candidate. It is clear from looking at the crowds that people tend to be more excited about Donald Trump, his supporters do. And they tend to be excited enough to really turn out to vote. And that's where it can translate into real meaningful results, especially in close states. Now, right now in the state of Texas, Donald Trump is leading by a comfortable margin at the moment. But in closer states, turnout is very, very important. If Republicans don't turn out to vote, if Trump-supporting independents don't turn out to vote, then there's no way Donald Trump can win the election. He's got to have those people turn out to vote, and as of right now, it appears that they are more excited to vote for Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton supporters are about Hillary Clinton.
All right, and do we have any more questions or comments? And keep them coming, by the way.
Right, we have a lot of comments.
Okay.
A lot of people on both sides.
Okay.
But there's one comment from Donna Gratt.
Hi, Donna.
She says, just go out and vote, people, rather than just commenting.
And you know what's interesting about that is we've seen it here in Texas, and I believe we've seen that in other states. Early voting has really been record-setting here in North Texas and really statewide. Huge numbers. And, of course, here in Texas, we've had an explosive population growth in North Texas. But I don't think it's just that. I think it's more people going out and voting, which is interesting because these candidates are the most unpopular candidates we've ever seen. So is this a case of, God, I really don't want that person to get elected?
I think it's a love-hate situation. Either they love them or they hate them, and they're showing up to vote one way or the other. Something that, when you're looking at polls, is, we measure likely voters, people who've proven that they voted in the past. That's what we're looking at. Now, if there is a tremendous number of people to show up who've never before voted, that can alter some numbers. Donald Trump brags that he's got all these people out there that have registered to vote, that have never voted before. They're going to come out and vote for him. Well, if that is the case, then yes, his numbers could look better than this. If that is not the case, his numbers may not be quite as good. If Hillary Clinton and the Democrats have been successful in registering new voters or turning out voters who've never before voted, then that can change numbers as well. So as of right now, both of these campaigns are focusing on turnout and getting their base to vote, as well as people who may lean their way.
All right, well, let's get to our next graphic and the DFW area. We always break out for North Texas. I always find this set of polls very interesting, where we compare DFW with the rest of the state. And here, it's actually a tighter race. It's really a 6-point race here in the DFW area. And unlike statewide, where most of the undecided people actually went to her as opposed to Donald Trump. That's interesting, I think, no?
It is interesting. Perhaps it shows a little more of maybe a little bit more of a moderate tilt here in the DFW area. Perhaps it is a little bit more of a battleground area than the rest of the state.
Well, Dallas is a Democratic county.
Correct.
Where our other counties, and of course, Dallas County is larger than Tarrant and Collin and Denton counties. But certainly when you combine Tarrant, Collin, and Denton, that's more Republican, obviously, than just Dallas County. But I think that may have a lot to do with it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's typical of most urban areas. If you look at the urban area tends to vote more Democrat. And then you look at the suburbs surrounding it and the rural areas surrounding a city, they tend to vote more Republican. That is a pretty typical situation as you look around the country. And you'll notice that on election night when results are coming in, you'll notice the blue counties and the red counties,
right,
which usually surround the large...
the suburbs.
You're correct.
Right, right.
And the rural areas.
And the rural areas, of course. And then our next graphic, we were talking about this before, the favorable and unfavorable, and this is where Donald Trump has really done a lot better this time around than before. This is actually the first time, I mean, take a look at August until now. I mean, what a drastic difference. This is the first time people actually have a more favorable view of Donald Trump than unfavorable. What's going on here?
Well, I think that what happened is a lot of Republicans, a lot of people that are leaning conservative are now making a decision. They've made a decision. They've got to choose Hillary or Donald. It's a week out. They've gone with Donald Trump, obviously, according to our poll. And since they've gone with Donald Trump, they've decided he might not be so bad after all. Or maybe it's because they dislike Hillary Clinton so much that Donald Trump looks, much better compared to Hillary Clinton. It could, and likewise, if you don't support Donald Trump and you decide to support Hillary Clinton, you may now have an unfavorable view of Donald Trump.
And then that brings us to our next graphic of Hillary Clinton. And she still remains very highly unpopular here in Texas, although her favorables have gone up by 8 points since August, and her unfavorables have gone down. She still is viewed far more unfavorably here in Texas than favorably.
Correct. Her very unfavorable numbers were very, very high.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of people in the middle with Hillary Clinton.
Right.
There were not a tremendous number of somewhat favorables or somewhat unfavorable. The big numbers are in the very columns of very favorable and very unfavorable. So Hillary already has a lot of people that have decided about her. So does Donald Trump. But Hillary in the state of Texas, which is a red state,
right,
is not faring as well as Donald Trump.
And, we go back to that whole email issue. And I remember on Friday, Hillary Clinton held a news conference in Iowa, and she was asked by a reporter about the emails and what impact it might have on people voting for her. And she said she believed most people had made up their minds already. Does that suggest, do you think that's true based on the unfavorables?
Well, most people deciding?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think most people have decided. I think she's right about that. However, in this election, most people doesn't necessarily matter because these races in particular states are so close that even some people, moving some numbers, can make or break a state for Hillary Clinton and give an election to Donald Trump. So just some people, it could be 2% of people, but if you can switch 2% of people, that's a 4% swing. That can put a lot of states in play.
Right.
So that's something to consider. And something else when people talk about there that we talked about earlier, a lot of folks will talk about national polls. On the news you'll hear national polls a lot, and national polls really don't matter. It is a state-by-state election. National polls are meaningless in this campaign. They really are, because you need to look at how the battleground states are doing and how the states that are close, check those out, and then you can determine by adding up the electoral college votes how someone is doing. The national polls really don't mean all that much. These state-by-state polls are very valuable.
They're the crucial ones. Aparna, do we have any more comments or any questions? Does anybody have a question for us?
We don't have a whole lot of questions, a lot of comments, and I think what you said, Scott, to Brian's point, people have made up their mind. A lot of people saying Trump, a lot of people saying Hillary. A lot of people's minds have been made up. A lot of people voted as well. So
that's good. We like to hear the fact that people are voting. Let's get to our next graphic. And this is, I guess all of these, questions and then divvying up who's who when we answer these polls. The male-female How did they do? And here, Donald Trump among men leads, which is no surprise here in Texas. He's always had the lead here. But women, it looks like, I mean, the last couple of times I remember it was tighter. Here, he seems to be separating a little bit with Hillary Clinton. More women going for him.
Well, Texas is, as we said, a red state, a conservative state. So it's not surprising that he is leading. But you can see the difference between men and women. Now, Republicans generally do better with men than they do with women. That is a general statistics, in politics throughout this country. If you look at a Republican candidate, they generally do better, obviously with white voters. They obviously do better with men. Women, sometimes Republicans have struggles. And you can say there are many different reasons for that. But Donald Trump is running against a female candidate as well, which also gives an advantage to Hillary Clinton. Women also tend to vote more frequently than men. If you look at national turnout numbers and state-by-state turnout numbers, women usually show up to vote more often than do men. So that's why the women vote is always so crucial, and you hear people talking about the female vote because women do vote, and they vote at a few points higher than men do.
Now, it's interesting because I go back and forth on this. I mean, obviously, this is a historic election because if she wins, Hillary Clinton would become the first female president. And before the FBI announced that it was going back in and looking at the emails, I noticed Hillary Clinton was starting to mention that fact again. She had really not mentioned that a lot, but was starting to bring it up again, and the surrogates were starting to bring that up again, I guess to try to finish the race, to close the race positive and make more about the historic nature of it. Now she seems to be on defense again, for obvious reasons.
Which is what you and I had discussed before in our many different interviews, that Donald Trump had to get back to putting Hillary Clinton on the defense. He had to stick to the issues and put Hillary Clinton on the defense. Well, he's actually stuck to the issues the last week or so. If you've noticed, he's kind of toned down his rhetoric a little bit.
Yeah.
He's really no recent controversies, and as in recent, I mean, the last week or so. And Hillary Clinton has been the one with the recent controversies.
Right. Well, that was a bombshell that the FBI dropped. Everybody was really surprised by that.
So I have a question. Jeff asks, will early voting be a factor since prior to Friday FBI news, some may have already voted?
Well, that's an excellent question. Do we know the answer to that?
Well, absolutely. I'm sure there are some people. Now, as we discussed earlier, most people have made up their minds about the emails, whether the FBI's investigating Hillary Clinton or reviewing her emails again. Most people have made up their mind about the emails. However, we go back to the fact that these elections are very close, and some people, it may have changed their votes. They had already voted. Obviously, they can't change their votes. But early voting is still going on now. And don't forget absentees. Some people have already mailed in their absentee ballots as well. So they may have wanted to change their vote now that this has happened, but they can't. And there's nothing we can do, nothing they can do, nothing anyone can do about that. But people that are voting now, it could still change their vote, and that's where the impact could be felt.
All right, thank you for the question, Jeff. Let's go to our next graphic here, and this is a racial breakdown. And among whites, no surprise there, this is where Donald Trump does particularly well, especially here in Texas. He's got a 30-point advantage over Hillary Clinton. But when you take a look at African Americans and Hispanics, what do you make of that? I mean, certainly Hillary Clinton getting 70% is not a surprise, but are you surprised by the 24% of African Americans going for Donald Trump? And then look at Hispanics, where it's 39%. What do you make of that?
Well, look, in the state of Texas, you go back to elections for, let's say, statewide elected officials here in Texas, and Republicans have won the Hispanic vote in the state of Texas. They have done that. And so there are conservative-leaning Hispanics in Texas.
Well, on the social issues,
correct,
many of them are Catholic.
Absolutely.
And so they are values voters in that sense.
Correct. And Hillary Clinton, of course, is pro-choice. Donald Trump is pro-life in this election.
Right.
And so that could have something to do with it. immigration is not necessarily a concern for every Hispanic out there. So perhaps some Hispanics agree with Donald Trump on his immigration stances, some might not. He's got some controversial stances, but apparently there is a chunk of Hispanics who agree with Donald Trump regarding the African American vote. Yes, it is surprising. Republicans usually do not do very well with African Americans at all, and by not very well, I mean 10% or so. Donald Trump is doing fairly well in Texas with the African American vote, and there could be many factors for that. Perhaps they view him as not the establishment. Perhaps they really don't care for Hillary Clinton. Perhaps he is a person that they think will change things, or maybe his comments, which he was given a hard time about, where he said, "What do they have to lose?" Maybe that worked. I don't know.
Well, when you talk about turnout, right? It's a lot of people have said that Hillary Clinton needs a large African American turnout. She also needs young people. This was the Obama coalition, right, of young people, African Americans, minorities, to turn out for her. And, we'll see what happens, but she needs that.
Hillary Clinton does not seem to have the same excitement with Hispanics or blacks or young people as Barack Obama did. And that can be a real problem when we're talking about turnout and people actually showing up to vote. Whereas we said Donald Trump supporters seem to be very excited to turn out and vote. There was actually the front page of the USA Today, I don't know if you saw that, 2 days ago, showed that Hillary Clinton's support among millennials had dropped 6 percentage points. That's a problem for Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Because if a Democrat candidate for president cannot excite young people, blacks and Hispanics, then they're having serious issues with turnout, and they could potentially cost them a few points in particular states. And as we discussed, that could make or break a state.
Do we have any more comments and questions?
We're getting a lot of comments.
Okay.
Roy Jordan is wondering if Hillary could have put the whole email controversy to bed early on by just releasing all her emails.
Well, I mean, thank you, Roy, for the question. What about that? I mean,
Hillary Clinton, now, this is interesting, and that's a great question. But if you have watched the Hillary Clinton campaign, they've had kind of some issues with not getting ahead of things. Hillary Clinton's health issue a few weeks back.
Yeah.
She was sick. They didn't want anyone to know that she was sick. And then she almost fainted, and it all came out, and it was actually worse than if they would have just said she was sick in the first place and she took a day or two off. Emails, same situation. If I were advising a client, I would say go ahead and get it all out and get it out early. Get every issue there is out early, because it doesn't matter. Look, 2 weeks ago, everyone was talking about Donald Trump and women. Just 2 weeks ago. No one is talking about that now hardly. Why? Because the news is now Hillary. Politics can change in an instant, and Hillary Clinton's timing cannot be worse.
But I think what I think is very interesting is if you go back, you could make a case where these were 2 October surprises, right?
Correct.
So you have the first one, that tape of Donald Trump 11 years ago with that show.
Which the Hillary Clinton campaign kind of held on to for a while. They kind of had known about this issue and held on to it.
So you could make an argument that hurt him greatly, really for the whole month. I mean, that really depressed his numbers. And then you have this bombshell really late last week on Friday. And so we don't know how much of an impact that could have. Now, based on what you said, the numbers, because these races are so close in the battleground states, that remains to be seen. It might have an impact, just the very reminder of that this investigation is now back on.
It's looming. That's the problem. It's looming.
Yeah.
And there's no closure to it. That's the problem for Hillary Clinton. And with Donald Trump, I mean, again, something can happen last week, and it seems like an eternity. And no one talks about it anymore. It seems like it's old news. And now Hillary Clinton is the news, and it's not in a good light for her right now.
Right. And certainly the timing isn't great. We have more comments?
Yes, we have a question for you. Polls are too variable. What is the sample size, and is it truly random? Is a question from Michelle D. Graham.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. And we talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating because people come in and all the time. So,
well,
yes.
Thanks, Michelle, for the question.
Yeah.
The poll, to answer your question, was 980 likely voters. It was 383 self-identified Republicans, 304 Democrats, and 293 independent voters.
And again, that is very representative of what we find here in Texas.
Correct.
And we talked about this earlier for people just joining us. The fact that there are more independents now. People are getting away from the parties.
They are, absolutely. And again, the independents, the numbers are extraordinarily high with young people and with Hispanics. They tend to be drifting towards no party affiliation and not favoring a particular party in their registration.
They're just looking for a candidate. And of course, here in Texas, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, you don't register in a party.
Correct. You don't register in a party in the state of Texas, which is different than some states.
Right.
And that's why you will see a huge swing. Look, the white vote, you will see somewhat of a swing. The white vote tends to go Republican. Black vote, you see a minimal swing in black vote. It tends to go Democrat. Hispanic vote can swing, and it can swing in big numbers. And so that's why Republicans, and you always hear them talk about this in national campaigns, we've got to work on the Hispanic vote. Why? Because it can swing in huge directions either way.
But you go back and on your point, you go back and you take a look at past elections with Republicans not going out and to the African American community, the
Correct.
Hispanic community, and trying to sell their policies. This time around, Donald Trump has gone to African American churches. He's been criticized in some cases for what he has said, but he is the first Republican presidential candidate that I remember to go out and do this.
Well, you got to give him credit for being bold. I mean, the guy has, he said some things that I'm sure all of us disagree with. But he has made some pretty bold statements, and perhaps they've worked. Which
is part of his attraction,
it's
right?
It's part of his attraction. Some people like that. They like that he says what he thinks, and they don't think he's a politician, and people have been kind of fed up, and we've noticed that in national polling.
And that was going to lead to my next question, and that was, we keep hearing that this is a change election, right?
Correct.
So if that's the case, Trump should be leading Hillary Clinton just based on the fact that this is a change election. But the biggest test for Trump is, I think, can they see him in the Oval Office? Hasn't that been his biggest test?
That is an issue, is presidential. Does he look presidential? Does he come across as presidential? These are the two least popular presidential candidates in the history ever. We've never seen, this is an election like we've never seen before.
Right.
And so the election night results are going to be so fascinating to watch because none of us have ever seen an election quite like this. We're expecting record turnout. We're expecting people to vote who've never voted before. It's very interesting to watch. But in regards to a change election, this should be a change election, meaning if Republicans had a candidate that might not be as controversial, let's say they picked a Marco Rubio or a Jeb Bush or a John Kasich. Republicans would likely be up in the polling by 15 points on Hillary Clinton.
Based on her negatives?
Based on her negatives and based upon polling that we saw earlier on. We looked at where, Republicans in a general ballot question, Republicans did better. You look at Republicans early in polling, you'd say, how would you vote if the election were held today and it were Marco Rubio and Hillary Clinton? Marco Rubio did phenomenally well. You could argue that someone like a Marco Rubio would have been able to swing the Hispanic vote in his favor. George W. Bush received 45% of the Hispanic vote back when he ran for president nationwide in 2004 when he ran for re-election. Now, you can compare that to Donald Trump's numbers nationwide now. 45% is a huge number for a Republican to get. Now, George W. Bush was from Texas, and he spoke Spanish. Marco Rubio would be a Hispanic Republican, and you could argue that, wow, he could really swing those numbers. So I think that if it were another candidate, perhaps Republicans would be up by a lot more. And you could probably hear that on the street. You could probably ask people, and they aren't necessarily excited about Hillary, but they don't like Donald Trump, so they're voting for Hillary Clinton or vice versa.
Vice versa. So very quickly, let's talk about battleground states, right? So right now, for Trump to win, because he's still behind, and he may never catch up. We'll see. He needs Florida.
He's got to have Florida.
He needs Ohio. He needs Iowa. He needs Nevada. And if he gets New Hampshire, plus he's got to keep all of Mitt Romney's 2012 states, which includes North Carolina,
right, which is very close in
Hillary Clinton's favor at this point, Arizona and Georgia. He's got to keep all those states. That gets him right to 270. Now, Colorado has been shifting back away from Hillary. She still has a 4-point lead there. If he gets Colorado, he doesn't need New Hampshire.
Correct.
So how do you see this? If he's got to have all those states. I mean, the challenge is still for him.
Correct. This is still Hillary Clinton's race to lose.
Yeah.
She is, demographics have favored Democrats for a while now. The Electoral College benefits Democrats as of right now. And so Donald Trump would have to really, it would have to be a perfect storm for Donald Trump.
And these are the
Correct.
states, these are the 5 tightest races that we've got on the screen right now. Obviously, Trump leading in Florida, as we talked earlier, Ohio and Iowa. And Arizona, it's tight. It's 0.6 in Hillary Clinton's
Which it should
favor.
not be.
Right. It should be solidly
It
Republican.
should be red.
Right. And Nevada, I think, is down to 1.5 points. It is Hillary Clinton still leading. And then we have a whole other list of other crucial states, which included the North Carolina and Colorado. Right. What else? Pennsylvania, which I don't see going. I do not see going his way. I see her holding on to that, right?
But, you know, this election is like one we've never seen before. We don't think it's going to happen, but it could potentially, yes. And, of course, that all depends on turnout.
Right.
You know, we were looking at Nevada and Arizona. Hillary Clinton has to turn out Latino voters. She's got to turn out Hispanics. If she cannot do that, then she might not win those 2 states, and they will flip to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was recently in New Mexico. He's making a play for New Mexico as well.
But the polls don't suggest.
They don't.
Yeah.
But he is making a play, and he's trying to, you know, really go around the country and take advantage of the situation that Hillary Clinton has found herself in now with the FBI.
And he's going to be in Wisconsin tonight. Do we have any more questions or comments?
There's one question, and you might have to wear your, you know, analyst hat to figure out this out, but
okay.
Tony says, is it possible for a candidate to win the election but not get inaugurated? If that happens, how would the presidency proceed?
Okay, all right. So I think what Tony's asking, thank you, Tony, for the question. I think what Tony's asking is, let's say Hillary Clinton wins the election, but because of this FBI investigation going on, let's say she's indicted and she drops out. Then what happens? I read an article about this because I was curious about this. What I read is that Tim Kaine would have to be inaugurated as the vice president first, and then with succession rules, then would be inaugurated as president. So there's a step process to go there, and then I don't know what happens to the vice president. I guess he
would appoint.
He would appoint a vice president at that point. But I think we'll have to wait and see.
Well, that's the great
what
thing
happens.
about the United States of America.
There's a plan.
We do have a plan for everything, and there is a succession plan in the United States. So that's a great thing about our country is we have had peaceful transition of powers ever since the creation of this country.
Right. Well, thank you, Tony, for that question again. Do we have any more comments?
A lot of comments, you know, back and forth.
Yeah.
A lot of people supporting Trump, a lot of people supporting Hillary Clinton, and then they're talking amongst each other.
Good, good. We love the conversation.
A very spirited conversation going on here as well.
All right, well, very good.
Spirited conversation for a spirited election.
Yeah, they always are, but this one I think is on steroids. I think we can all agree on that. Well, thank you so much for everybody for joining us on our CBS DFW Facebook page and our website, cbsdfw.com. Brian, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Appreciate all your hard work on the poll. Thank you again so much for joining us. And coming up later on CBS 11 today, the one thing we did not talk about is what are the most important issues facing Texans this election. So that's coming up later today on CBS 11. For now, I'm Jack Fink. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.